First up, we have Mr. Wiatt Bowers. Wiatt grew up in the Baltimore-Washington area and earned a bachelor's degree in communications from Temple University in Philadelphia and a master's degree in urban and regional planning from Florida State University. And we will not hold that against him. Sorry. Wiatt is a transportation and land use planner with more than 20 years of experience. He and 4 other urban planners formed TransForm Jax in 2011 with the goal to re-energize Jacksonville's urban core. Wiatt, you ready? Woo! You're very welcome.
Thank you. I'm also going to do the no mic thing, I'm pretty sure. It works, right?
Yes.
I thought it might.
What it means is you stop when you are ready to start.
How about I just say go? Stomp. Okay, so everyone talked, they gave a quick bio of who I am. In my day job, I'm an urban planner. I'm involved with the local section of the American Planning Association. In 2009, we had our state conference here in Jacksonville, and as part of it, we held a charrette on reimagining the Jacksonville Landing. We also had the conference here in 2015 or 2014, just a few months ago. At that charrette, it was a 4-hour event organized as part of the conference with the help and permission of landing staff and management. 25 urban planners from around the state coalesced, spent some time walking around the building, and came up with some ideas that were presented to Tony and were also later presented to others, including the Downtown Investment Authority. They were asked to think about what it would take programmatically and design-wise to make the landing flourish again. Thinking about form and function, thinking about the relationship and connectivity to downtown and the river, some of the market factors, and the potential for attractions nearby. So this is, kind of just a shot of what each group, we had about 4 different groups, and they sat around, or stood around, a table with an aerial after walking around and getting some information from landing folks and started drawing up ideas and writing them on pieces of paper and starting to draw them. And at the end, you will see some images that were created from that. But let's start with this. This was a plan, a vision for the landing that was put out probably in the mid-2000s. And what you see at the bottom, Chris Flagg and Fred Jones, those were the 2 people who organized our charrette and did the facilitation. But this idea that Tony had kind of went around the existing structure with multifamily residential, hotel, office, but notice the orange roof is still there. Notice the architecture. At the bottom, notice the Main Street bridge ramps are still there. For good or bad, it was worked around that infrastructure, but this densification was all around the existing structure. The existing structure stayed in this situation. Now, this was a starting point for what they came up with. They looked at doing a SWOT analysis: strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats. Strengths. We all know the location's great, okay? We also know it's landmark. It's an iconic thing. The roof is iconic. That courtyard is a great public space. It's probably some of the best people watching you'll get in Jacksonville. It has events. There are nearby hotels. There is on-street parking. What, of course, there wasn't at the time and isn't still is a whole lot of on-site parking. The internal layout is challenging at best. There isn't a synergy with the rest of downtown. In fact, maybe some people think it turns its back on downtown. There are maintenance issues. There are service issues. How do you get service in there? Residential, and so on and so forth. But from an opportunity standpoint, there's a ton of things. Can we utilize the waterfront more? Can we open the building up to the river has been talked about. Green space, more programming, food trucks, woohoo. Hogan Street Plaza connecting to the Performing Arts Center, doing some things with a food court going up and down Laura Street maybe, and some other attractions. At the same time, we have to think about the threats. The fact is there is a stigma to the landing, and there is somewhat high tenant turnover. But also, we're still a relatively small visitor market, so when you're catering to visitors, that's a problem. And there's competition, whether that be the beach or the town center or St. Augustine, there's only so much to go around. So the results of the charrette: opening the center of the building up, adding mixed use, integrating with Laura Street improvements, which at the time had not happened yet, but they were about to, maximizing the river, getting a parking garage, getting an attraction, adding green space, removing the Main Street bridge ramps was an idea that came in that charrette. So let's look at the aerial from above. This is what we started with, and again, this is 2009, so notice the roundabout is not there. But this is the facility. This is the landlocked system, and it's surrounded by the roads and the infrastructure that limits what you can do. So the first thing was, let's tear a hole right through the middle, boom, and open it up to Laura Street. But the rest of the structure stays in this first phase. And you just start to create an entrance feature and a connection up here to Hemming Park. Then, as you go to the second step, you start to say, well, what can we do with the roads? Can we reroute them a little bit? Maybe get a little bit more of a super block. And what you start to notice is new buildings coming on, starting to face to Hogan Street, and trying to activate that angle to the river, and you replace that part of the arc, and then the courtyard gets a little bit bigger. And then you mirror it on the other side by doing the same thing, getting rid of the Main Street Bridge ramps and putting some new buildings, maybe a hotel in there, some mixed-use retail, but again, pushing it back. So now the only part of the existing building that's left is that part right along the river, but we now have a much larger central courtyard space for events and programming. And then you go to the next step and you go, well, maybe you get rid of those buildings on the river and you open up the Riverwalk, and now I have a much larger space there, and I can start to have green space, the distinct urban space. You start to connect to the Performing Arts Center, and you also use the other side for an attraction, be it a convention center. Parking deck, guess what? It's almost ready to open. It's right there. That's where it is. So that was kind of the vision that came out of that. But what's happened since? So there have been new proposals for the landing. There are finally more workers coming back downtown. We now have lots of events going on. We have Laura Street done. The adjacent parking garage is about ready to open. Now, these last three things, they're opportunities because they're pretty cool spaces and activities, but they're also challenges because they're competition. And you have to think about how much, again, can we spread the pie when there's Hemming Park and there's Unity Plaza and the landing central feature. But, there haven't been many changes to the landing. There is constant road construction. I bet you how many of you got caught with Main Street Bridge being closed again tonight. This is a challenge for Tony and for them. It just is really difficult. So my personal thoughts now on the latest proposal. I think the mix of uses in this last version is finally right. I think we got the mix right. What we're not quite there yet is the shape and the form of it. We really need to think about it as a special and iconic place. There needs to be a strong discussion about the green space issue, but we need to think about the landing as a district and more than just a building, maybe a couple blocks long. Thank you. Questions? Okay.